I would be remiss if I didn't start criticizing how the room was laid out. Because this is a design conference. So those chairs, I don't give a shit about how they have to take photographs or how far. Those should be really close to first row. I mean, so I'll probably walk down and talk among you, and it'll make them crazy because they're filming it. But the importance of a live meeting is a live meeting. This isn't the importance for me is not putting it up on the web. The importance is first, it shouldn't be designed that I give a talk of 18 or 19 minutes that's the right length to put up on your boob tube. It's the quality of theater. It's the quality of communication. And it's the design of that. And it's the design of everything. Now, the title, I don't understand where the title of my talk came from. It came from a management team that probably is not still here. But why design now? It's like, why weather now? Why? It must be global warming. It must be something we did to ourselves. No. Weather changes. If you go back a couple hundred years, there's much more severe changes in weather than we've had in the last while. That's not to say we shouldn't do better housekeeping on the planet. But they're parallel things. And I do understand that change only occurs with the perception of the actuality of catastrophe. So unless we perceive that it's going to be catastrophe, or we actually have catastrophe, it doesn't get people off their butts to change. We need that. Also, I disapprove of VIP seating. It's like them and us. And then a lot of people don't come to the front anyway, because maybe they think the speaker spits. But we don't spit, usually. You should just be here. You should be standing in line to rush for the front seats, because you actually take it in better. You really do. You should design your life. You should design how you hear, design how you listen. I created a conference called TED, and sold it in 2002. And the last conference I did was I called as a subtitle, simply the greatest design conference that ever was. And that arrogance nobody called me on, which I was just shocked. I was trying to put something in everybody's face, but they didn't. And it was a good idea what I did then. What I did was broke it into 10 or 12. It was 12 sessions then. It was a very long one. It was my last one. I was going to screw with everybody and have them stay long. And the sessions were the design of humor, the design of the near future, the design of music, the design of your life, the design of the car, the design of the chair. I was trying to take design and make it as broad as possible. I also feel that I design gatherings. That's design too. I had some conversations with some people out there, some young man, and I asked him if he was ambitious, and his speech wasn't designed. How he responded wasn't clear enough. He didn't say the words were in the wrong tense. It wasn't his bad grammar, it was what people got used to. And then somebody comes up and said, keeping busy? Now what the hell does that mean? Why would they ask me keeping busy? You have to design your questions. And ultimately, all the work you did, Bill, were the design of questions, because it's the question that matters. Congratulations on your new job. It really is the question. It's not the answer. Well, we'll stick on you. How old are you?
67.
67. He learned nothing by answering that. We all learned he was 67. It's in the question you learn something. That's what gets you at some information and some fact. Am I right, Frog? It's the question. Okay. She worked for me once, and we did a terrific project, and it still is in a carton someplace, and it's just as valid now. And it was about the question. It was about the bifurcation of aging, the 2 points of view that you have when you age. You're old. I'm 75. You have trouble putting on your socks. Why are you having trouble? What are the things you can use to help you put on your socks? Where should you sit? How should you do it? What is your problem? That's part of your day. But then the story is also your caregiver. How can they help you put on your socks? What can they do to help you? So aging is a duality between the caregiver and the care receiver. And by knowing each other's point of view, you understand the phenomena. You see something when you bifurcate it from two different points of view simultaneously, and it's a way of understanding. That's part of design. So it's not why design now, it's rather the opposite. Why isn't everything designed? Why isn't everything thought about as something that you think in a logical fashion of how to solve it? Apparently, I created this thing of this 18-minute, they told me 19-minute talk, 18-minute talk, which now has become a stamp, so you can have 18-minute talks. It's not about the gathering, it's about a different experience. I read in Wired magazine that a whole story on swag, giving away things, and it turns out I invented swag. So in my new conference, I'm doing a new conference, and I'm not selling it because it's sold out, you can't get in, so it's nothing I'm selling here. I'm not selling from the stage or the floor. I have no swag. I think at a certain point in your life, you have to destroy everything that you thought up that might have been a good idea and start again. That's the advantage I have over everybody in this room. I am more aware of my ignorance than you're aware of your ignorance. Each of you is trying to sell your expertise. You go around to clients, to each other, within fiefdoms, within offices, within foundations, and you try to move ahead by selling some expertise you have. Well, you have a limited repertoire when you sell your expertise. I don't care who you are. I sell my ignorance. I have an unlimited repertoire. I can attack anything that interests me and try to find the pattern that would take me on this journey from not knowing to knowing. That journey is the excitement I have in every day, because I don't know dick shit. And I start, there's something that interests me, and I pursue this journey trying to ask questions and find out how to get there so that I can feel in my viscerally that I understand something. I'll tell you real quick about some projects, and you'll see the pattern in the projects, and these will be not now I did this, then I did this, and then I did that. That's not this kind of talk. In 1962, I did a book. That's a long time ago, I know. 1962, I did my first book, and it was the plans of 50 cities in the world all to the same scale, because I didn't understand what they looked like next to each other. So I did a book about that and thought there must be hundreds of books like that. And it turned out to be none. It was they mounted this book on exhibit. I did it when I was teaching. It was my first teaching job. And they mounted it in an exhibit in Yale School of Architecture. It was up for about 25, 30 years. And it was just the plans of 50 cities to the same scale made out of plasticine. And I had no money, so I had to do 25, and then with some students, then we had to scrape off the plasticine to do the second 25. I mean, that's the way it was. So now it's quite a bit later, 50 years later, I guess, or whatever it is. And the UN, 2 years ago, said more people live in cities than don't. So I wanted to go out and see what's been done since, so I can understand one city next to another. I got curious. Well, nothing. There's no two cities in the world that do their maps to the same scale or with the same legends. So commercial land use must have about 125 different designations on different city plans around the world. Well, you can say, well, you can always change the scale, electronically. Yeah, you can. But there's no methodology for showing the border to a city. And every city goes over its border, its political border. Now, if you don't have a border, you don't have an area. If you don't have an area, where do you collect information? And if you collect information with a border, then you can have a density, and you can compare one city to next to the other. But we don't have that. It went between the floorboards. That's a design problem. It's also a stupidity problem. But we don't have some of the most fundamental things on how to talk to each other about where everybody lives. But we don't have things on health either. We don't have a way of understanding things. We know more about our cars than we know about our bodies. If I went around this room and asked you what's your blood pressure and what's your different blood type things and blood things, you wouldn't know. I've done it before. You just don't know. How many people over 45 or 50 have had a colonoscopy? How many people have had a baseline MRI when they're 20 so they can understand the rest of their lives? And I'll bet you if GE made a program where 300 million people got a baseline MRI, the cost of a baseline MRI would go down like that, and everybody would have a baseline to compare and be able to understand what their health is like for the rest of their life. And they, along with 2 other companies, do MRIs pretty well. And it gives you no radiation. MRIs give you no radiation, just a fucking bang in the head when you go through it. For the magnets, you know. And if you're going to hammer nails in your head, they got to be titanium. Or gold. Well, I have that problem I have to tell you about later. David Blaine wants an MRI of him hammering a nail in his head. But I said, David, you can't because it has to be a titanium nail or a gold nail. I'll get a titanium nail, he said. So I'm supposed to ask you how he can get a nail put in his head. Okay. That's the way it goes some days. Okay. I made some notes because I was sort of very nervous this morning. Much of our grasping is about wealth. We talk about wealth and change. And design is about change. It's this real great embrace with change. You embrace it because it's going to happen anyway. And the richest person in the world in 1848 was John Jacob Astor. And he died, and he made his money selling beaver pelts. In 1877, the richest person in the world was Commodore Vanderbilt. He made his money in shipping. In 1937, the richest person in the world was Rockefeller. He made his money in oil. Today, the richest person on earth, they say, I mean, who knows, is Slim, who in Mexico, who made it in cell phones and sports teams. Or maybe it's Bill Gates still, we don't know, but they made it from cell phones or from selling smoke, you know, something like that. But you make it in different ways. And it'll continue. I don't know what will drive wealth in the near future. I know it'll be something different. It'll be a surprise. It'll be an excitement to see that. And so nothing is straight line, that you keep on doing a better version of what doesn't work. Many designers design that way. I was just at a conference last week. I gave a keynote at a conference, and there was a lot of, in fact, there's one person from that conference here who came to hear me talk because he thought it was okay then. So I'm trying not to repeat myself. I'll repeat one thing because he sent me a letter that sort of started out that way, and it was cute. But most people were showing some beautiful work. It was a society of newspaper designers. And they showed some really exquisite work, and everything they were showing was a better version of what a newspaper would be online, what a magazine would be online. Now, it was a better version of what wasn't working so well. Now, just think of that sentence. A better version of what doesn't work. So then you work very hard to do a better version of what doesn't work. What do you get as a result? A better version of what doesn't work. A better version of what doesn't work is not so terrific. It's just a better version of what doesn't work. Better versions don't hold it for me. It's starting again. I'll tell a little story which probably didn't happen quite this way, but if you think of a moment when they invented the celluloid and they invented doing films, and they didn't know how many frames to put to a second, so it was a little jumpy. But what they did is they photographed stage shows. And then they put a few more frames, and they weren't as jumpy. Then they could add a little color, and that was better. And then sound. What did they have? They had a better version of a portable version of a stage show. It wasn't a movie. A movie is something else. You can move around something. You can go for close-ups. You can do things. It's an art form. It's extraordinary. It's something that a designer can think about. Not just a replication of the earlier modality. So with a couple people, wonderful people, I'm working on, as one of my projects, trying to work on a new modality. It's not a book. I mean, do you realize in your iPad, I'm furious at Steve, that in the iPad you see a page turn. That is just so ridiculous to have an electronic thing and you see a page come up. It's not a page. That's phony. And then they're so proud that you see the back of the other page with the type backwards. What are they doing? I mean, that's silly. It's absolute silliness. It's insecurity. It's not letting go. It's not moving forward with a new modality of what this can be. That's exciting to think of what's next. How many Jews in the audience? Jews? Okay. The people who aren't Jews won't get this joke. You just won't get this joke. I'm sorry for the non-Jews. It's a very short joke. 2 Jewish women were sitting around minding their own business. That's a fucking funny joke. Now, why is a joke so interesting? Because it's the opposite of expectation. That is what a joke is. Steve Wright, 2 Steve Wright jokes. Everything's in walking distance if you have enough time. Is there anybody here talking about questions that hasn't been asked or asked, is it in walking distance? What a dumb question. Is it raining? How cold it is? How are your knees? How dangerous is it? How interesting is it? It's not a good question. And the one I just heard from Steve Wright, just a new one, I just hadn't heard it before. He said, I'm addicted to placebos. That's sort of a throwaway joke. I'm not going to build on that one. But I will build on an Emo Phillips joke, which is one of my favorites. I hope some of you know Emo. I think some are too young, and he's passed you by, this odd thing, and I'll do a bad imitation of him. He said, for years and years and years, I thought my brain was the most important organ of my body. Until one day I thought, look who's telling me that. Well, that's not a trivial joke. Look who is telling you about anything you're asking. Look how loaded up your question and answers are to each other. Or even in your life, you ask the electrician if something's wrong, and he says, oh, look who's telling you, who you're trusting, how you don't check what you're doing about things. There's also some interesting metaphors. The person who conquered the most land ever was Genghis Khan. He was born in, I think, 1227. And in 1227, he was born, and he conquered more of the world than anybody else. They don't know where he's buried. They think they might know. But he never built any monuments. But what did he do? And this is a great metaphor. Apparently, he built more bridges than anybody else ever in the history of mankind. Because in conquering land, he had to build bridges. Hi. I know, I was just saying hi back, yes. There's a great numerology thing about 5, 4, 3, and 9, which I'll go into another day. But that reminded me of it as 5 things. But think about that often somebody does what you don't think. He conquered all this land, and yet his contribution was bridges. And the metaphor of bridges to things, of connective tissue to things, is interesting. That the result of one thing gets you another. That wealth comes... Well, I was talking about wealth. The turn of the century, 1850 to about 1900, more millionaires lived in Yucatan and Campeche than any other place on Earth. Wow, that doesn't make any sense. Millionaires in that rather arid area of the world. Now, I think most of you who don't know geography, which is most of you, think that whole area up there, you call it the Yucatan. It isn't. It's 3 states, the Yucatan, Campeche, and Quintana Roo. And as a subset, Quintana Roo, which has the invented city of Cancun at the top, and at the bottom, the capital, which is Chetumal, didn't become a state until 1915, and was lawless to 1931. So basically, it wasn't even part of Mexico until 1931. But that's not the story. The story is that more millionaires lived in the Yucatan and Campeche, capital of Yucatan, Merida, capital of Campeche, because this was the Industrial Revolution, and everything had to be shipped, raw goods, manufactured goods. And there was no way to pack them. They didn't have corrugated cardboard. They didn't have access to a lot of wire. They needed sisal. They needed rope. That's where you grew rope. That's where you grew sisal, there and in South America, in Africa. So sisal became ubiquitous, and then they invented other things, and everything went into ruin. Change and design for change, and the changes in design, and accepting it, not trying to force things through a hole, or thinking that patterns go on just like that, but this embrace with understanding, and that understanding precedes action. Most cities, most companies want to take action before they understand, because it's more comfortable to take action than really doing the homework of understanding. I mean, really understanding. The great blue whale, it's about 117 feet long, and you can't quite visualize that, but I'm going to give you a little image that you will never forget about the great blue whale, and that is its heart as big as a little VW Beetle, and its tongue as big as a bus. Its tongue as big as a bus, and its heart as big as a Beetle, a Volkswagen Beetle. I say you won't forget that. It's not exact, but it gives you a sense of something. Each of you are reading in the newspaper. This morning it was used in the newspaper, both newspapers. Well, the Times and the Journal. The number trillion. I'll do a quick version of this story, but it's really interesting. If you lost $1 million every day from the year 1, there was no year 0 because it was done by Dennis the Short in the 6th century, creating the calendar backwards. That's another whole story that you should read Stephen Jay Gould about. He writes about it quite beautifully. But if you go from the year 1 and you lose $1 million every year, and an extra $1 million in leap year, when they finally invented leap year, and you take it to today, from the year 1 to today, every day, every year, $1 million. You would still have to lose $1 million a day to the year 2738. You don't know what a trillion is. That's a trillion. You can't put your arms around that. And yet you read it and you don't question the fact that you don't understand it. I have to wrap it up. There's a stage whisper over there. I will wrap it up, everybody. I'll wrap it up. I can talk for 2 hours, and I'm not. Goodbye.